Forced Bride of the Vampire Lord. Chapter 1 to 10. From now on, you are announced as husband and wife. Now you may kiss the bride. An awkward silence filled the church when the Pope announced it, and Hazel, who was standing there with her head bowed, finally raised her head. She looked at the Pope with her glassy animated eyes and he coughed. Rho alpha d alpha n nu e, C, 0 meters. For the first time in his life, he was embarrassed to announce a marriage, and the last line was completely a disaster. He coughed to clear his throat and then continued. With that, the marriage is registered in front of the God, and our blessings are with the new couple. Once again whispers could be heard, and a bitter smile formed on the face of Hazel, who bowed her head to show her respect to the Pope. He nodded back and she closed her eyes. Everyone was waiting to laugh at her, to make fun of her and get the satisfaction of insulting her. But she did not want to give that satisfaction to them. She would not let them see her miserable state. After marriage, the husband holds the hand of his new bride and introduces her to the guests. But here she was standing alone on the day of her marriage, while the man had just sent his sword as his representative. Yes, Hazel had taken all the oaths of marriage with a sword under the mocking gaze of her family and so-called friends. But she would still not give them satisfaction to see her broken. So, once she turned towards the guests, there was a pride smirk on her face that surprised everyone. Her amber eyes that were mostly meek were filled with stars, and her fair skin was radiating under the chandeliers. Clad in a white gown, she was looking one of the most beautiful brides of the empire. Look how she is looking at everyone arrogantly, even when she is standing alone on the altar. Could anyone be more miserable than her? Let her be. She had only a few days left in her life. Why did we care about someone who is going to die anyway? The sound of laughter and scorns came after the sarcastic comments of her brothers and sisters, and soon everyone started laughing at the girl who was standing there alone with her head held high, yet the shine in her eyes did not dim and her smile did not fade away. But I did not get it. Why is her husband not here? I came especially to see who she was getting married to, asked the daughter of the Duke Finoralia, and the girl beside her chuckled. You do not know. The matter was, Hazel, His Majesty is coming to meet you. Quickly stand up and make yourself presentable. Hazel, whose face was covered with paint here and there and her hands were still holding the paintbrush and lost in the painting in front of her, raised her eyes and looked at the maid with a frown. Rho alpha d alpha n nu, I am not in a mood to joke with Anne, I am busy. The girl replied with a frown as immersed herself in the painting again. Anne sweated. She was already scared to her wits when she received the message, yet the girl thought that she was joking. Madeleine. No, princess, I am not joking. We have just received a message from the main palace that His Majesty is coming to pay you a visit. So, you better change clothes and wash the paint off your face. Do you want to look unpresentable to your father on your first meeting with him? Asked the girl in a bit of an intimidating voice, but Madeleine just stood there blankly. The paintbrush fell from her hands with a clank, creating a new stain on the white carpet, to which Anne looked with a frown, but Hazel did not even notice the scowl on her face. She was lost in the words of her maid. His Majesty, the Emperor of the Flamingston Empire, her father was coming to pay her a visit. That also for the first time since she had started living in the palace. It would be her second meeting with her father. She could not believe that it was really happening now that she had lost all the hopes of meeting him. But why now? Was there any occasion? Did she forget something? No matter how she tried to analyze it, she could not think of a valid reason. Hazel, what are you waiting for? Do you want to meet your father with that red and blue face? Huh, the cold and sharp voice of Anne and the jerk on her hands brought her back to her senses. No, I will go and dress up at once. Hazel stood up and ran towards her room. Hey, do not fall down, or you will greet His Majesty with broken teeth or limbs. Anne shook her head at the girl who was stumbling on her own gown as she tried to run faster than lightning. Darn, I need to go and prepare a few dishes too. She mumbled as she ran towards the kitchen with faster speed than Hazel. When Hazel reached her room, she took a breath of relief. Her room had nothing like a princess. It was a simple room with minimalist furniture and simple decoration, with a small bed without a canopy and a small closet. 2 chairs and a small sofa on the side, with a small coffee table with red carpet on the floor. Hazel opened the closet and shuffled all her dresses with a frown. It has been more than a year since she had brought any new dress. So, she was not sure which dress would still look presentable. Finally, after looking at all of them for too long, she settled for a blue dress, hoping that the dark color would be enough to hide small tears the dress had. Hazel, hurry up, the Majesty is already here. Hazel, hurry up, the Majesty is already here. The dress in my hands slipped on the floor as I jumped on my place. How could he reach here so early? It is okay, you will be fine. Let's just wash your face and get you ready in a bit. Hazel felt bad for Anne, her only friend and maid, as she was also shuffling and making the preparations for today. Her expression softened and she nodded when she said so. With a smile, she came in and helped Hazel in washing her face and made a small bun of her unruly hair. She even adjusted Hazel's dress and took out the only necklace she had. It was left by Hazel's dead mother as her remembrance. She looked at it with longing eyes when she felt Anne's hand on her shoulder. You are looking beautiful, my lady. Your mother would have been proud while seeing you. Hazel smiled, but her eyes widened when she looked around. What happened? Hazel asked as she looked at her worried face with concern. Rho alpha d alpha n nu e, backquote c, 0 meters. Nothing. I think that I have left cookies in the oven. I need to go and look before they get charred. Will you go out and greet His Majesty till then? Hazel chuckled, looking at her worried face, and nodded. All right, then I should go and give my father company till you bring the tea and snacks for him. Hazel did not know why, but she felt that the fear that was crawling in her heart lessened, and she felt lighthearted after talking to Anne. With slow and poised steps, Hazel walked towards the small hall of her annex palace. There was a man standing in the mid of the hall looking at the painting she was making a few minutes ago. It was the painting of a fair she had read about in the books. She wanted to go there, but she could not. She had made it with her imagination. Your Majesty, it is an honor to have you in my humble abode. She held the corner of her dress a bit too tightly as she bowed her head in front of the man who had given her birth. Yet it was only the second time she saw him. Hearing her voice, suddenly the man turned to look at her. His golden hair was set in his back and his blue eyes were intimidating. His golden mustache and beard had taken a large part of his face. Even when he was meeting his daughter after such a long time, there was no warmth in his cold eyes. He was just looking at her from top to bottom as if he was assessing the value of an asset. Her nervousness started to return when the man did not reply to her greetings. Thank goodness she was holding the dress with her hands so that her sweaty hands were hidden, and so was her fear. You have grown into a beautiful lady, Hazel. Finally, a breath of relief left her mouth when she heard him complimenting her. Raise your head and take a seat. You are my daughter, not a subject. She wanted to ask if he remembered it only now, but she pursued her lips and nodded. Rho alpha d alpha backquote n nu, om. She did not want to create a scene and disappoint Anne. She took slow steps towards the sofa and sat on it like Anne had taught her. Still, a frown formed on the face of her father, which he hid hurriedly with an amiable smile, but his eyes were still cold. Hazel, I wanted to congratulate you for your coming of age day that is next week. Her eyes flickered and enlarged and her lips parted in surprise. She was not expecting him to remember her, since he had never come to wish her her birthday all this while in the past 18 years. I know that you have a few grievances that I have neglected you, but you have to understand that the life of a king is never simple. I have many responsibilities to take care of. She nodded as she did not want to drag the matter. Though she knew she was mistreated because she was the result of one night stand he did not even remember when he had, but she was still grateful that he had given her a place to live when her mother died, or she would have died long ago or would have been taken as slave by a rich old man. I know, father. I apologize for my insolence and thank you for congratulating me. I am honored that you come personally to wish me. The smile on her face was genuine that reached to her eyes, and his eyes flickered. His face turned to look at the other side abruptly and she frowned. She turned where he looked only to find Anne coming with the trolley, and she sighed. The girl who was asking her to be brave was looking more anxious than her. Hail to the son of the empire, your majesty. Anne bowed her head and wished the emperor, who took a deep sigh and nodded. Anne stood and took the dishes from the trolley and placed them on the table in front of the emperor. I am not only here to wish you for your coming of age ceremony. I am here to announce that I have fixed your marriage too. Thump! The spoon Hazel had picked up to serve him a meal fell on the floor as she looked at the man with horror-filled eyes. She had read in many books that the nobles only help in upbringing his illegitimate kids so that he would marry them off to increase his contacts one day. It was no less than selling them for their benefits. Her eyes turned cold as she looked at the man who was there to tell her that he had finally decided to get the amount he had spent in taking care of her by selling her off. You need to calm down, Hazel. Maybe it is a chance for you to get out of these four walls and find your happiness with a man who will cherish you. Quote. Quote. You need to calm down, Hazel. Maybe it is a chance for you to get out of these four walls and find your happiness with a man who will cherish you. Hazel looked at Anne with wide eyes. How could she speak out that loudly in front of the emperor? Was she not afraid that he would kill her? Her head snapped to her father, but surprisingly there was no reaction on his face, as if he did not hear her. A frown formed on her face as she looked at her father with a confused look. What is it? Are you not happy that I am going to marry you? He asked in a cold voice as the warmth on his face dissipated, and Hazel realized that he had heard Anne. He had just decided to feign ignorance conveniently. But she also realized that she did not have any choice but to accept the marriage for now. Or else her father would be furious. She was sure that the man did not love her to show her any sympathy. It would be better for her that he thought that she was an obedient person before she could come to a decision. So, she bowed her head and shook it. No, father. How could that be? I am just surprised at the sudden news. Her voice was meek and her head was bowed. That surprised the ego of the man sitting in front of her. He nodded with a pleased smile on his face. That is fine. You still have some time left. You will get married on the day of your coming of age and will travel to the family of your husband on the very same day. So, start your preparations. I would arrange for a teacher for you in the garden to come and teach you some etiquette of a noble lady. She wanted to laugh at his thoughtfulness. Only now did he remember that she needed to be taught too. But then could it be that she was getting married to a higher noble? That was why he was putting some effort even if it was minimal. As she was sure that he would not have taken that much initiative if it had been anyone commoner who could offer him a good deal. But then there was a chance that she was the second wife of any old fat noble who was already the father of children older than her. Or else who would want her as his wife. She was even surprised that someone other than the royal family knew about her existence too. Since there is nothing else, I would take my leave first. He stood up ready to leave without even giving a single look to the table that was filled with all types of dishes by Anne. Only I knew how much hard work she had done in preparing them. Poor girl, I did not have the prowess to teach my father a lesson. Wait, I remembered I still did not know anything about my husband, not even his name. Then how would I decide whether I should marry him or not? After all, I did not want to end up getting tormented by the main wife all my life and shed tears while hiding in my room only to get molested by a sleazy man, Rho Alpha D Alpha backquote and new, Only the thought made my skin crawl and I shivered badly. The man gave me a side glance with his indifferent eyes, yet his face filled with annoyance. Rho Alpha D Alpha and new L. He did not look pleased that I had stopped him in his tracks, but it was a matter of my whole life. Hazel. Anne called me in a worried voice, but I gave her an assured look. It would be fine to ask about the name of my husband. Right. But when he looked at me giving an assured look to a maid, his frown only grew further. He stomped his feet in annoyance as he turned completely to look straight into my eyes. Would you even speak? Why have you stopped me? His chilly voice rose all the hair of my body. But I gulped the fear and replied in a clam voice. Father, I think you forgot to tell me the name of my future husband. I asked in a meek voice, but a smile started to form on his cold face, but it was neither pleasant nor warm. Do you even know the names of a few nobles, huh? How would you even know who he is even when I tell you his name? He asked as he titled his head while his gaze bore hole in my heart. How could he be so heartless? Did he even look at me as his daughter? She wiped the sweat forming on her hands as she looked at the worried face of Anne, her only friend and family. I still want to know the name of the man I am going to spend my whole life with. Hazel replied in a low but confident voice as she looked at the man with resolute eyes. Though she had never met a single noble all her life, she had read all the books that existed in the empire. She had even read the books issued by the royal family that contained the details of all the nobles many times that she knew everyone by heart. A single glance at them and she would be able to recognize all of them. The man looked at the stubborn girl with ASMRK, even if she knew the name or the person, it was not like she could change her future. If she tried to do something funny, the man was capable of feeding her even from the depth of hell. She was bound to him the day he had announced her as his future wife, that even gods could not change the decision, yet the girl was trying to outsmart him. How funny. Rafael Casanova de Carta. Rafael Casanova de Carta, the name rang in my ears like the siren. She felt the dread filling her heart. All the blood of her body froze and she could hear her heart thumping like crazies. Thump, she fell on the floor as her knees gave away while the word continued to pierce all her hopes to live a happy life. She had heard this name before. She had read about him and his empire. He is not a human. How much time had passed when she finally came back to my senses? She was standing alone in the room while her father had gone for a long time. The room was cold and deserted like her life, yet she had always realized that at least she had a place to live and good food to eat with Anne on her side. But now, she was not sure anymore how she would live when she had been asked to be a sacrificial lamb in the name of marriage. Are you okay, my lady? She looked back at the girl who had always called me by name even when she was the princess, and this was the first time when she was calling her, my lady. It is okay to cry sometimes, if you feel like it. She assured Hazel as she looked at her with concerned gaze, and the tears that were on the brim and threatening her to fall any moment came out like a broken dam. Anne, they are not even selling me to a human. Hazel whispered in between her sobs while her tears stained her face and wetted her dress. You are brave enough to handle even demons, my lady. I have faith in you. Hazel shook her head as she heard Anne's words. I do not want to marry a night creature, Anne. Please, help me in running away from here, the girl pleaded miserably, but just when the words left her mouth, 2 guards entered in. Hazel looked at them wide-eyed eyes, no one needed to tell her why they were here. And as she had expected, they opened their mouth coldly and told her. We are here to keep you safe till the day of your marriage, my lady. She was done for. Now she was under the gaze of 2 guards so that she could not run away, and she was barely left with any time. You will be fine, my lady. Maybe the marriage is not that bad. Anne tried to coax the girl who was turned into a mess as if her sunny life had turned into a frozen dream. You will survive this, my lady. And soon you will realize that the dark clouds were actually filled with sweet rain that would bring the spring, but no matter what Anne said, Hazel could not see any silver lining in her life. Rho Alpha D Alpha and Nu L. Why don't you go and rest for a while, my lady? The governess will be here soon, one of the guards said awkwardly as they saw the girl shaking her head and crying like she had lost everything now and then. They are right, my lady. Come, let me escort you in, you need strength and rest to survive this. Hazel wanted to deny it, but she had no strength left after crying for so long. Her wails had turned into sobs and hiccups while her whole face had turned messy with stains. Rho Alpha D Alpha backquote N nu, Om. Anne held Hazel's hand and helped her in walking towards her room. Shush, everything would be fine. You have survived worse. Just do not give up so easily. Anne patted the back of the girl soothingly. She had seen the girl growing in front of her eyes. A lot of times she had thought that she would break down and would not be able to bear the loneliness, the insults and coldness of her family, yet every time the girl had only grown stronger like a tree that would grow no matter what the season was. She knew that Hazel had a strong desire to live and she would only grow after this incident too. Soon the girl started hiccuping and closed her eyes, yet Anne continued to rub the back of the girl until she was sure that she had been sleeping soundly. Once sure that she was asleep, Anne stood up only to hear her hiccuping again. I do not want to die, Anne. Her heart broke when she heard the sound of Hazel with tear-stained eyes, but she took a deep breath and closed the curtains of her room and walked out. Do you think she would be able to handle it? Yes, she was looking very heartbroken. Anne looked back at the two other girls that were wearing the same uniform of maids as her and sighed. Since the decision was already taken, there was not much to discuss. Hazel would be fine after some time. But it also means that we have to leave soon. Anne looked at both of them with a daunting gaze and they took deep breaths. This time came earlier than I had thought. Yes, even I was expecting that it would take a few more years for her to get married. The both took a deep sigh, but when their gaze met the cold gaze of Anne, they took a step back in fear. Why are you so angry? Do not tell us that you were prepared for the news, retorted the girl as she tried her best to keep her facade in front of Anne. No, but I was sure that was the case when I heard that her scum father was coming to meet her. The man did not even explain to her that the man would not hurt her. She was looking too scared. You should not have let her read those books in the first place, chided the second girl, and Anne sighed as she sat on the chair. I thought that the night creature would fascinate her, who thought that she would end up getting scared of her future husband. Wake up, miss. The governess is already here. Hazel frowned in her sleep as she turned and slept again, but the BNA jing on door only increased. Her lips pursued into a thin line, but she did not try to open her eyes at all. She was feeling so exhausted that she had no desire to open her eyes and check who was on the door. She had decided to sleep until the end of the world. My lady, if you did not open the door, then I have to break it and call your father. Hazel had turned to the other side, ignoring the empty threat of the man when she heard that her father was being called again. She did not want to see the cold face of that man again who had sold her off to a night creature. She stood up hastily and ran towards the door. She glared at the man who had instructed her, but his blank face did not change. My lady, the governess is waiting for you. Although he was calling her my lady, there was no respect in his eyes. Hazel pursued her lips, but she did not have any other choice, so she nodded and walked behind him. They crossed half of the palace and then reached the hall where an old woman was waiting for her. Hearing the knock on the door, the lady turned and looked at Hazel. She eyed Hazel from top to bottom and then snorted. Her eyes were cold that made Hazel's face harden too. So, you are the one who was going to be the empress of the Ferendensine Empire. Hazel had a frail body with a soft face. She was damn beautiful with her platinum blonde hair and mesmerizing green eyes that looked like emeralds. But she was too innocent with her face. She did not look like she could handle the night creatures. Hazel just nodded as she entered. What do you know about them? Though the voice was stern, there was a hint of concern in the voice of the lady. Hazel raised her head but shook it. Though she had a bit of an idea, she was not sure what her role was as the empress. The night creatures are not like the myth said. They can roam in the daytime too, but they prefer to stay in the cold places where the sun is not that prominent. They can eat, play, dance, run, walk, do anything like us, but they have blood with that too. Though most of the vampires keep blood in bottles, mixed with other supplements to keep it safe. But most of nobles suck blood directly from the host, and the most delicious person for them is their wife. Hazel shivered when the words sunk into her mind. It meant that she was nothing but his blood bank. As if reading the mind, the governess nodded her head. Yes, that is what I was trying to say. Except that they love beauty and revealing dress and a bit of sensuality, and most importantly, you have to be obedient to them. Now we will start with the eating lessons. The training continued with the governess, but most of what Hazel learned was Rho Alpha D Alpha backquote N nu, Om. Though she was going to be the empress of the Ferendensine Empire, her basic work was to look enticing and serve as food to her husband. It only increased her fear to get married and leave for their empire right then. Soon the day of her marriage arrived, the day she was going to be announced as an adult. Rho Alpha D Alpha N nu E, CM. So, here Hazel was getting married to the emperor of the Ferendensine Empire, Rafael Casanova de Carta. This alliance would be like a peace treaty between both nations, so that the fear that had crawled in the hearts of humans would decrease and threatening war for the past few years could be postponed. You are doing your best to serve the empire. The citizens will always be grateful to you, said my father as he patted Hazel's shoulder when she walked towards the hall. Hazel smiled and nodded as she assured him that she was fine with his decision. Not that she did not have any choice. Though she did not love anyone else or have something noble to do here, she was just an extra after all, she was still scared about her future. She had heard that the man did not even come out to meet the royal conveys that went to receive the orders of her marriage. Vampires were famous for their beauty, yet he was so mysterious that very few had seen him. Do not worry, he will not kill you. Since you are the symbol of peace between both nations. Her governess assured her as she sat beside the Empress, Hazel's stepmother, who looked at her with pity. There were all her sisters and brothers whom she had never seen. They were looking at her as if she was a scapegoat who was going to die any moment. She had never thought that this would be the way she would meet with her so-called family for their first time. He will not kill me because of the peace treaty. Hazel repeated these words like a chant, but still she was feeling anxious, her palms were turning sweaty and her stomach was churning. Do not worry too much or else you will look ugly in your own marriage, teased Anne, and Hazel sighed. If only I could take her with me, she mused, but she did not have the courage to ask Anne to risk her life by following her. You are looking too beautiful, my lady. Hazel nodded and looked at the mirror. The maids have spent all day in making her look beautiful and ready for this grand day. She was wearing a red dress as the norm of their nation instead of the white one like other princesses worn in their marriages. Her golden hair was prepared in a bun covered with flowers of real gold and adorned with pearls and rare gemstones. She was wearing a red dress as the norm of their nation instead of the white one like other princesses worn in their marriages. Her golden hair was prepared in a bun covered with flowers of real gold and adorned with pearls and rare gemstones. She was wearing a necklace that was shining brighter than the moon and a matching bracelet and earring. Her fingers were left empty so that he could put a ring in it. And other rings did not give competition to what he had chosen for her. The makeup was done perfectly, with her lips redder and her cheeks creating a blush, her eyes were shimmering and her emerald orbs were looking like two small moons. Yet she was not happy to look so beautiful at once. As a princess, she should have received this kind of treatment daily, but she had lived no better than maids. Like an extra, she had always lived an outcast wife, and now even when she was getting married, she would live a miserable life in the unknown world. You are looking too worried, my lady. As a princess you should always be calm, told Anne as she rubbed Hazel's back a bit trying to make her feel better. My lady, did you not like the makeup or jewelry? Asked the maid who was given the task to doll Hazel up. Her eyes were teary as she looked at Hazel, that confused her. She did not understand why she was so worried about her when they did not even know each other. But then it might be Hazel's last chance to see so many humans around her. So, she did not dwell on the matter and cherished the concern she was getting from them. Her expectant eyes and the worry formed on Anne's face made Hazel realize that she still had not replied. No, it is just perfect. Hazel replied with a smile that came out stiff. A knock on the door interrupted their thoughts, and shortly after a court lady came in. Hazel, we have to leave now, said the governess that came behind the court lady. She nodded as she knew that they had shown more than enough patience by waiting for her until she replied to the maids and looked so many times into the mirror. Row Alpha D Alpha and Nu L. Hazel stood up from her seat with a heavy heart and Anne bent to hold the bottom of the heavy dress so that she could stand properly. Where is father? Hazel asked, as mostly fathers escort daughters on the altar of marriage. Though they did not have a good relationship, at least this much she deserves to be the sacrificial lamb. He might be busy, therefore I was asked to take you out. Is there some problem with it? Asked the governess, and Hazel shook her head. She was a fool to think that her father would come out to escort her. What was the sense in expecting from the people who never cared about her anyway? They did not care if she was happy or not, then why was she giving them a chance to see her upset? Why was she making a miserable face? Since when she has been this vulnerable? Row Alpha D Alpha backquote N Nu, Om. No, Hazel shook her head as she mustered all her courage and a bright smile formed on her lips, making everyone around her enchanted to it, as they smiled back with the same enthusiasm. Then I will see you in the hall, told Anne as she hugged Hazel one last time and left another maid. Now only Hazel and the governess was left in the room. Shall we? She asked as she looked at Hazel with a bit of impatience. Hazel nodded, taking a deep breath, and after a minute they walked out of the room. The procedure was simple. She would walk to the altar where the groom would be waiting for her, and then they would exchange vows and kiss each other. After that she had been escorted in a carriage to the Florentine Empire where her life would be started, and there only she would meet the other family members of her new husband. An empress could never show her fear, there is another crown of confidence on her face, except this one. And now you are going to be the empress, the ruler of a nation. You have to be strong, Hazel. This was the first time someone had felt that she would not be the food but a ruler. It made Hazel understand the gravity of the situation. I will try my best to survive, my lady. Thank you for teaching me everything. Hazel tried her best to fake confidence on her face. She raised her head and walked proudly, though her hands that were holding her dress had turned sweaty. She was having trouble walking in that long dress as she had never worn one with a meter long behind her. It was too heavy, and with the high heels it was taking too much struggle, yet she walked poised. Everyone turned to look at her when she entered the altar, and she smiled brightly towards them, as if it was a marriage with the one she loved. She could see their mocking face, and the one that was filled with disgust. As if they were waiting for her to make a joke of herself or wanted to see how an abandoned and forgotten princess would be sacrificed, so that the chances of war would almost end with her sacrificial marriage, and that was what made a knot on her stomach. Only when the Pope coughed, she realized she was already there. But what surprised her was that she was standing there alone with only a sword by her side. I looked confused, but everyone only scoffed and looked at me as if I was a fool. Well, the prince did not have time to attend the marriage. So, he sent his sword to attend the marriage. Quote. Quote. Hazel looked at the scenery passing through the window with a lost face. The trees and the large lake, she would have looked at them with wonder if it would have been any other time, but now. She did not even know what was in front of her eyes. Not even did she get married to a sword instead of a man. She was even asked to kiss it in front of everyone. Hazel could not help but curse the so-called bad in her heart once again. She did not care if he was so powerful and a night creature. She deserved some respect too, even if she was going to die. She wanted to die with pride. Live your life well as the Empress, my daughter. She wanted to laugh at the words of her so-called father. But before she could scorn and shout at her father, since she was the Empress now, she should have some power. She was dragged to the carriage by the maids. Her brothers and sisters whom she was meeting for the first time waved at her as if she was a knight that was going to sacrifice in the war. Rho Alpha D Alpha N Nu E, CM. Let's bet for how many days would she be able to survive. Do you think she would even pass the palace and meet her husband? I heard that he was the only ugly night creature, that was why he did not dare to come here. What a poor luck. The only thing that was good about night creatures was their beauty. She didn't even get that. Well, at least, she was the one who was chosen. She wanted to punch all of them. How could they be so cold towards her when she had never harmed anyone? She did not even remember who said what things, except that they all waited for one thing. That was her death. Was that how a family was supposed to be? Though she knew that she would never get an equal treatment due to her mother being the maid of the palace and she was the result of a one-night stand, she had never thought that her ending would be this soon. Even her governess looked at her as if she was looking at a corpse. She did not even have the confidence that Hazel would survive, even when she was the one who had taught them. She wanted to shout and tell all of them that she was not dead yet, but she was not confident enough how long she would survive. She waited all this time to get a single assurance that only Anne could give her. But until she was dragged into the carriage and left the palace, Anne was nowhere to be seen. Had she lost hope in me too? Hazel took a deep sigh as she leaned on the seat of the carriage. The carriage was luxurious and grand, it was adorned with rare gemstone and was showing how big empires had enough wealth to splurge on the vehicle that only a woman can dreamt. Rho Alpha D Alpha backquote N Nu, Om. Her eyes fell on both maids that had come to escort her to the palace. Their faces were pale and gloomy too, as if they were going to receive their death punishment. Looking at their faces made her further gloomy. She felt dizzy as the carriage got closer to her destination. Just when they crossed the borders of the empire, the place turned eerie. The winds were so cold and howling that she shivered. It was more like the sound of shrieking of the souls that had received an early and painful death. She could see the mountain a bit away from where the carriage was. Even they were covered with a veil of mysterious fog and dark clouds. The snow had covered the land completely, like a layer of soft white flowers that had been decorating her grave. Everything around her was so gloomy that her heart dropped and unpleasant feelings had started to cover her completely. Her heart started to beat irregularly as the carriage continued to move towards a castle. It was a big and white castle whose roofs were covered with snow, just like the path. As Hazel entered the door of the castle, the band that was waiting for the arrival of the bride started playing the songs of welcome. Though the sound of the song was beautiful, Hazel could only feel that they were playing her last tribute to humanity, as she was nothing more than a sacrificial lamb. But her heart came out of her chest when the carriage stopped abruptly. All the maids looked at her with pale faces, their expressions were nothing better than her. If I go in, I will die, she muttered under her breath as she looked at the large amount of maids and knights that were standing on the door of the castle, waiting for her to alight out of the carriage. But if I did not go in and try to run away, I would still die. It was certain that her father had made sure that the carriage would not stop anywhere but at the door of the palace, so she did not dare to play any trick. Running from here only meant that she would die the second she would run. If you are going to die anyway, at least choose a way that would save our lives, pleaded the scared girls who looked at her as if she was their last hope. A mocking laugh formed on the face of Hazel. They all used her as if she was nothing but an extra to be discarded easily, while they would enjoy the fame of being the family who sacrificed their daughter for the well-being of their empire and humanity, and yet they think that they were righteous. Ha, to think that I will be thinking about you even when I am going to die anyway. You sure have the guts. Now I even want to see how the Stagenrib Empire would survive. Equals 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 equals. Ha, to think that I will be thinking about you even when I am going to die anyway. You sure have the guts. Now I even want to see how the Stagenrib Empire would survive. The girl gritted her teeth as she looked at the maids who did not care about her at all and then the bouquet of flowers she was holding in her hands. It felt more like a chain to me. She knew that everyone in the empire was only waiting to see how Hazel was going to die and how long she would be able to endure. While she was still in her thoughts, the door of the carriage was knocked. She almost jumped from her seat but took a breath of relief when she saw that it was only servants and soldiers. She scanned the faces and body of the maids to see the difference but she did not find any. Though she could notice the red eye of the knights standing in front of her. At least, maids are human. She even noticed that not all of them had a dark shade of red, they were light and bright red. My lady, we are here to escort you, replied the maids in a blank face. Not a single trace of warmth or happiness could be seen in their voices. Her eyes even went behind her when she noticed that the line of maids were never ending and the whole ground was covered with flowers and red carpet in the middle of it. She had not expected the place to look that beautiful. If only her husband would have been normal, then it would not have been any less than a fairy tale. Instead of being joyous, she felt only fear crawling in her heart. At least my death would be grand and full of extravagance. She was ready to get sold but she had never thought that she would reach straight to heaven. Pardon, did you say anything, my lady? Asked the maids when they saw that she still had not opened the door and muttered something under her breath. Hazel blinked and was about to shake her head when a strange thought built up in her mind and nodded her head with a smirk on her face. If she was going to die, she would drown the whole ship with her, she would make sure that her whole empire would regret choosing her as sacrificial lamb. My lady, the maid called the lost girl again as she had still not opened the door of the carriage. When they say that she was smirking, eyes still not replying to them, they felt annoyed and their faces turned hard. Did the girl really take herself as the empress? She was nothing but a pawn, a clown that was sent for a peace alliance. Rho Alpha D Alpha N Nu E, C, 0 meters. Your Majesty is waiting for you, my lady, said the maid in a hard and sharp tone so that the girl would move. Rho Alpha D Alpha N Nu, Om. Her eyes turned cold when she felt the disdain in the eyes of the maids and knights. Yet they all were waiting for her here, they were here to serve us. So, she asked as she raised a brow nonchalantly and leaned back on the seat of the carriage. They looked at each other with bewilderment and then looked at her with a frown. My lady, you have to come with us to meet His Majesty. So that they could kill you for your presumptuous behavior, they added in their hearts as they looked at the arrogant and ignorant girl. No, she replied again as she blew her nails that had been painted red. No, I apologize but there is some confusion, my lady. What the hell was the girl talking about? Did she lose her mental balance with the shock of getting married to an eccentric night creature? They all looked at her with scorn, confusion and annoyance. But none of them felt pity on her. There is no confusion. I am not coming with you, replied Hazel with a deep sigh. They think that I was a retard but they failed to understand even a simple word like no. She shook her head at their foolish behavior and superior thoughts. Excuse me, my lady. Why would you not come with us? Asked the head maid who was going to be the lady in waiting for this crazy empress. Because you are not the one I am married to. Hazel shrugged her shoulders and looked at all of them as if they were fools. Ah, your Majesty is waiting for you to only meet you. But if you would not come then how are you going to meet the person you are married to? Explained the maid as if she was dealing with a 5-year-old kid and Hazel chuckled. So they seriously think that I was a retarded person. If he is waiting for me then he should be the one to come and receive me. I will not come out, unless your Majesty would come to take me personally, she replied with an arrogant tone and then closed the curtains once she was done. They all were shocked when she called the emperor so casually. Had she not been informed about her future husband even a bit? Did she not know that she was in the land of night creatures and an eccentric tyrant at that? How did she even dare to ask him to serve her? They all looked at the closed window and then each other with fear. If she would not come out of the carriage then they would die with her too. If she wanted to die, then she could. Why was she dragging all of them? The knights gritted their teeth and decided to take her out forcefully when the curtains were opened again. A smile bloomed on their lips as the girl finally realized her mistake. One more thing, ask him to be dressed up in a matching groom's dress. Quote. One more thing, ask him to be dressed up in a matching groom's dress. Quote. They all looked at Hazel horrified. Even if she had lost her senses, why was she dragging all of them with her? She better go and die herself. My lady, your Majesty would not appreciate your actions. They tried to hint to her that she could be in trouble but the girl just snorted. Rho Alpha D Alpha N Nu E, C, 0 meters. Wait, I am not done yet. They all looked at her horrified when they heard her. But she continued to sit there calmly with an arrogant look on her face. But only Hazel knew how scared she was. Her hands had turned sweaty and her heart was running a marathon in her ribcage. She could feel that her heart would burst out any moment. But she was still adamant on her act, as dying with a heart attack would still be better than dying when all the blood had been sucked dry. The blood in her body flowed harder and a tinge of red came on her face due to the impact. Once he would be here, he had to bring a ring for me and then pledge that he would only love me and have me as her lover and wife. Not even once would he look at another woman, only then would I come out of the carriage. She added with her chin held high in the air. It was a common knowledge that vampires love sex and woman as much as they love blood. Both are their weakness. They are creatures that enjoy pleasure and debauchery. Except for a few, none of the vampires had one lover. That was why many did not even marry for hundreds of years, since they have a longer life. They do not care about things like lineage and family like humans but tend to enjoy themselves. And the emperor was even free from these ridiculous rules, as he was allowed to have as many women as he wanted as his lovers and concubines, and he could even have 3 wives. To think that a human would dare to demand loyalty from the emperor of night creatures even when the marriage was nothing but an alliance that was forced on them was an eye-opener for all of them. Many were not even able to react to her words. They were just standing there with enlarged eyes and parted lips. But not even a single of them moved. Tisk, who would have thought that the staff of a famous emperor would be this tardy and insolent? She replied in a scornful voice as she looked at all of them with disdain. Only then did the knights and maids come back to their senses. But the white faces of maids were making it clear that they did not dare to go to His Majesty and ask what she had said, but the knights. They still have their rationality there. They all looked at one of them whose eyes were darkest among them. Her governess had taught her that the rank of the vampires could be seen through their eyes. The darker the eyes, the higher rank he had due to his purity. The man gritted his teeth and walked forward in front of all the maids who left his way with bowed heads. What did you say? Do you really want us to inform your majesty about your foolish demands? He asked as he looked at the girl with cold and indifferent eyes. But her expressions turned colder when the words left his mouth. She looked at him with a cold and intimidating face, rho alpha d alpha backquote and nu, ohm. Ha, to think that even a servant would dare to ask questions to me, the empress was really an eye opened on how ill-mannered you all are. Just you wait, I would make sure that discipline would be followed and everyone would know their place. Now, are you going or not? The last sentence came so frostily that the vampire gritted his teeth. He felt humiliated that the girl dared to insult him. She was nothing but their meal. Yet she was trying to show her dominance on them. If she wanted to die, then he would make sure that it would happen miserably. Very well, I will go and inform your majesty about all your instructions. He nodded and was about to turn when his eyes met Alfred, the aide of your majesty. His eyes enlarged, but he looked down before the man could notice it. Sir Alfred, why are you here? He asked in a tone of respect, but the man did not spare him a glance as he looked around with deep penetrating eyes. His aura could be felt from the distance and all the maids bowed their head deep to not come in the eyes of the man. Hazel was observing everything keenly, trembling when she felt the presence of the man, but kept her stance and did not change her adamant and cold face. I am here to see why are all of you taking so much time to escort the empress. The man finally looked into the direction of Hazel as he asked the question. Is there some problem, my lady? He asked in a voice that was neither respectful nor too cold. Yes, there is. I am asking the maids and knights, but none of them is taking it seriously. She replied as she raised her head high, showing that she was not at all affected by his aura and presence. The vampire's gaze flickered, but he did not say a word as he looked at the knights. What is it that the lady wants? Fulfill her every wish right now, as she is the new empress of the palace. What do you mean by the new empress? She asked with a frown. Was she not the only empress? She had confirmed it umpteenth time that the vampire did not have any other wife. Am I not the only empress the empire has? She asked in a cold and rebuking voice, but the vampire only nodded, but a cold smirk from red on his face. Of course, after all, the previous 3 empresses have already died. Dash 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 dash. The man did not stay once he was done talking. He turned and left, telling everyone that he would go and inform your majesty personally about the demands of his new wife. Now everyone was waiting for the order of her death punishment. What do you think? Your majesty would send him to prison or would come personally to snap her neck? Asked a knight. I do not think that the girl was worth enough to come personally by your majesty. We are enough to kill her on one order of his majesty. Rho alpha d alpha n nu e, backquote c, 0 meters. Yes, I was even surprised that Sir Alfred had come personally to see if the princess had arrived or not. Hazel could hear the sarcastic comments of all the staff around her. Even though she knew that her end was near, she had never thought that others would bet over it. How cruel they were. She hated how they treated her as a piece to bet upon. On the other side in a dark room. I am glad that you have accepted the alliance, and that also personally. If you have asked your loyal man to marry, even that would have been enough, but to think that you took it so enthusiastically is a matter of example for others. I will personally recommend that you would be allowed to be part of the council now, your majesty. Complimented the old man in a black robe as he looked at the man with darkest red eyes sitting on the throne with lazy eyes. There was another woman who was sitting in the corner with a red face. She was having a hard time keeping that smile on her face, which was full of scorns. Her grip on the glass of wine had been so tight that her perfectly manicured nails could break at any second. When they heard the footsteps, their neck instinctively turned to look at the door to see the new guest. But they were surprised when they saw that only Alfred came back. "What is it?" asked the man as his eyes narrowed on his aide that had never come back empty-handed no matter what task had been given to him. Alfred nodded and shook his head as he ignored the probing gaze of everyone else and walked towards his master with a calm face. Walking closer, he whispered in the ear of his master so slowly that even after being gifted with the strong senses, the others were not able to hear a thing, though they continued to look towards them with the hope that they would at least get a hint. The bored and tired face of Raphael lit up when he heard the man, and a smirk brought on his lips. His dim and dark red eyes twinkled with a ray of light that only accentuated his pale face. Once Alfred was done, he took a few steps back and bowed his head, Rho Alpha D Alpha _ nu, Om. "What is it? Is there some kind of problem?" asked the old man with the black robe as 3 deep lines formed on his forehead when he looked at Raphael with worry. "Nothing like that, I will be back in a few minutes." With that he stood up and walked out of the room without giving any further explanation, leaving both baffled. While Alfred looked at his master with mischief as he followed him like a dark shadow. All the maids bowed their heads when Raphael walked out of the room and descended the stairs. There was a maid standing in every 5th stair with a knee-length uniform and a cleaning duster in their hands, or tray filled with blood. Ignoring them all, he took lazy steps towards a room and walked in. 2 maids bowed their heads again when he stood in front of the mirror. "Bring me the white suit of my marriage." There was a smile on his face as if he was joyous on the occasion of his marriage. The maids looked at him with shock but did not dare to waste even a second just because they were shocked. The vampire was eccentric. They did not want to lose their lives just because they were staring at him. They both bowed their heads and one of them moved forward to take his coat while the other one went in and brought a new white suit that would be appropriate for the groom. Once done, he looked at himself in the mirror and then walked towards a closet and took out a black box from it. Opening it, he took out a ring and then chuckled as if he remembered a personal joke, but his laughter only created goosebumps in others. But without caring about their reaction, he walked out of the room where Alfred was waiting for him. When he had seen his master's shining eyes, he was sure that he was going to escort the lady from the carriage. But who would have thought that he would also pay effort in changing his clothes and getting ready as she had demanded? Even when he knew that his master gets excited with a new challenge, he was surprised with the efforts he had put into it. Raphael tilted his head as he looked at the shocked Alfred, and an evil grin formed on his face as if he was going to kill anyone not for escorting his bride to the palace. That even Alfred felt the pressure emitting from him. "Are we done, or is there any other condition left?" he asked as he started walking towards the main entrance of the palace with the same cold smirk on his face. "Yes, master. Once he would be here, he had to bring a ring for me and then pledge that he would only love me and have me as her lover and wife. Not even once would he look at another woman, only then would I come out of the carriage." That was what she had added too.